Hey everybody, Danielle Hargenrader here, and welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Today I am really excited to bring you an awesome guest from Ireland. Phil Graham is a renowned competitive bodybuilder and sports nutritionist from Ireland. He has established himself as one of UK's leading fitness educators and coaches. He inspires a diverse range of clientele, ranging from personal trainers, everyday members of the public, right through to professional athletes across a wide variety of sports. Phil educates thousands of personal trainers every year through his seminars, workshops, and attendance at some of the world's largest health and fitness exhibitions. He actively writes for many major fitness publications, hosts the ever-popular podcast Elite Muscle Radio Podcast, which is available on iTunes, which we'll talk about more. And he works as a genetic supplements resident nutrition expert for product development. He is also in the process of writing his first book, The Diabetic Muscle and Fitness Guide. Phil's coaching and personal training is based in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and he also offers online consulting for those that cannot reach him locally. Okay, so Phil, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come on and speak to your guests.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate the amount of effort that goes into this on your end too, and the time out of your day. And I know with doing my own podcast about the editing and everything else in between. So massive respect to you, Danielle, for taking the time to do this.
Oh, thank you for all those kind words. But little secret is I really enjoy doing this. So this is as much for the public as it is for me. But no, I'm thrilled to have you on. So as we always do here, we want to know about you. We want to know about Phil. So give us a little rundown on your diagnosis with diabetes, which we kind of discussed off air. I think you said was 13 years ago, and kind of the path you traveled from then to now. Like, walk us down with you.
Yeah, so I'm 28 years of age now, and just around about 13 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 1. Now, I'll give you a bit of a background into the whole story. So I was overweight at the time. I didn't exercise. I had no interest in health. I wasn't from a family that had a particular interest in health. We were fed pretty decent, good food, but too much of it. And we didn't really exercise. I mean, video games and sort of lazy activities like golf and stuff like that were sort of more the norm. And I can recall one day going to school. We normally went to school on a bus, and we went with a group of friends. And every morning before school, we always used to stop and get what we call an Ulster fry. Now, in Northern Ireland, that is a combination of eggs, bacon, sausages, soda bread, potato bread. You guys won't have that over there. But safe to say, it's pretty calorific and pretty high in all the wrong stuff, should we say, depending on what it's cooked in. So I went, and I can recall this very day that I was going to school on the bus. And I noticed, looking out of the window, the registration plates on cars. And something just clicked with me that something wasn't quite right with my eyesight. And I noticed these number plates were quite blurry. So I noticed that my eyesight wasn't as sharp as what it was. And I thought I was just tired or something was wrong. But anyway, I let it pass. And I was thinking, I was only like 14, 15 at the time. And as I say, I went to get the breakfast with my friends and had tea, and the tea was maybe 3 or 4 sugars in it. And I can remember the entire day literally being incredibly dehydrated, going to the toilet left, right, and center. And long story short, that carried on for about 3 or 4 days until I said enough was enough. And I decided to tell my mom at the time. She took me to the doctors, and straight away, I was diagnosed with type 1. So I didn't really know what it was, but I can remember being brought down the hallway and brought into a room by a diabetes specialist and seeing pictures of amputated foots on the wall, seeing pictures of retinopathy and all these complications. So I sort of freaked out a little bit. And long and short from that, I began my lifelong journey of studying the human body and everything that goes on within it in an attempt to improve my own knowledge and understanding. I was always told that I had a choice to control this condition, that it was completely down to me, and how I ate and how I was active and how I managed stress and all these particular variables. So that was my sort of, how could I put it, blessing in disguise that got me into my career now. So the condition actually led me to go and study nutrition in university for 5 years. I went and studied clinical nutrition, biochemistry, and physiology with that. And from that, I went to work in the public health service. And I worked as a health improvement officer, where we worked in areas of economic disadvantage with diabetics and people who were obese, people who had heart disease. And we worked a number of different elements, from nutrition, physical activity, mental health, a whole host of areas. And I really got to see firsthand what poor health looked like in those areas. People that maybe didn't know how to cook, people that relied on fast convenience food, people who smoked, people who had a whole host of bad quality behaviors that weren't in line with optimal health. So as that time went on through university, every single day I was reading or studying something to do with the human body. And over that course of time, I picked up an interest in weightlifting. And I went to the gym for the first time, and it was a bodybuilding gym. And I can remember being intimidated going in. I was overweight, I was diabetic, so I just sort of sat on the recumbent bike for probably an hour and a half at the back of the gym and didn't venture down until I was probably maybe about a year later. And I fell in love with the weight training, and I took to it very, very well. And with all this reading and information that I was taking in, I was able to control my condition very, very well, but also get very, very good results in the weight room. And it wasn't long until somebody had noticed the potential that I had, where they said that, look, it might be worth your while considering competing in bodybuilding. So I went on to compete, and competed in and won various shows at a junior level, Junior Mr. Northern Ireland, Junior Mr. Ireland, Junior Mr. Britain, Junior Mr. Universe. And I reached a fair standard with that and thoroughly enjoyed it. It opened up a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential to work with other bodybuilders and actually help them with their nutrition, even though they weren't diabetic. So throughout this time, I was still at university. I was continuing my education, and I was experimenting with all these different nutrition protocols and training protocols, and just trying to find the perfect combination of variables that allowed me to get optimal control. And from that, I was still working in the health service. And then it just came to me at one stage where I was just getting asked and asked by people to help them with their diets and their training. And from that, I set up my own personal training business. And that was with general members of the public. And that grew exponentially. I helped a lot of people, again, public, and I ventured into professional sport, ventured into professional athletes that are on the likes of Men's Health and Men's Fitness. And I had a great client base. So besides all that, I lived with my diabetes. I controlled it. And I mean, I'm OCD over my diabetes, because from a bodybuilding perspective, whenever we go hyperglycemic, we break down muscle tissue. Whenever I go hypoglycemic, I have to take in calories. So it doesn't really support optimal performance, and it doesn't really support optimal body composition. So you can see how tunnel visioned I was in keeping this in control. So, I mean, over the course of my time living with diabetes, I had a lot of diabetics approach me and ask me about diabetes and ask me about helping them and stuff like that. And I always turned it down, because I respect diabetes as such a complicated condition, and to try and tell somebody a yes or no in response to a particular question depends on 1,000 different variables. So, you know, I turned that down for a long time. And then it was one seminar a couple of years ago where I had mentioned that I was diabetic, and there was maybe 10 or 11 diabetics queuing up at the end to see me. And it sort of was from that I was discussing it with one of my good friends, and he said, look, why don't you put together a book on diabetes? And I was like, oh, I don't know, because I never actually liked talking about my diabetes. Not many people knew I was diabetic. I always kept it, how can I put it, under wraps. So when I competed, I never talked about diabetes. I didn't want that pity from people, even though it was much to get on stage at an ultra low level of body fat. It was extremely hard with diabetes. I always kept it to privacy. I didn't talk about it much. It was my way of coping with it. And the idea of writing a book was acknowledgement of what I had, and I sort of hid from that for a long time. And you know, eventually I decided to pluck up the courage and write about it. And I'm in the midst of writing it now, and I'm, you know, keeping it strictly to, you know, the individuals that want to lift weights, that are between 18 to 30 years of age, that are serious about weight training, building muscle, getting as lean as possible.
Wait a minute. Did you say 18 to 30 years of age? So I'm too old for this book? Is that what you're trying to tell me right now?
Yeah, you could fit it in most certainly, but that's the.
I'm just
I'm writing it from the point of view of, you know, all the kind of questions that young males and young females, maybe they're in bodybuilding, maybe they're in CrossFit, maybe they're in powerlifting. And I'm writing it for those people because at the time, whenever I was diabetic, I never had anywhere to get advice from. I mean, if I wanted to get advice on weight training and diabetes and how to maximize muscle growth, there wasn't anyone. And I was always seeking out athletes and people who had diabetes. As much as my healthcare professionals were useful in certain aspects, they were useless in others.
Yes.
And whenever it comes to maximizing muscle growth and getting lean, you know, your healthcare professional doesn't really care too much about that. And a lot of that comes
from Ireland as it is in America then.
Yeah. So, you know, and you know, you're hit up with various myths and fallacies surrounding everything from protein intake to the various other things, and everything's got red tape around it. Now, I'm not writing this from a medical or clinical perspective. I'm writing it purely from personal experience in line with current evidence base. So everything that I talk about in the book is looked at from an evidence base. And you'll find in type 1 diabetes, evidence lacks in a lot of things. Never mind is non-existent. So, you know, certain things have to be talked around, and there's potentials for certain things to be looked at with certain, you know, caution and things like that. So we'll touch on that throughout. But I mean, you know, it's the whole actually managing your condition with exercise. And type 1 diabetes and exercise, in fact, the two can conflict each other when, you know, we're told that exercise is the #1 strategy to help improve control, when in fact it can actually do the opposite if you don't know what you're doing and you're not aware of all the complications that can happen internally. You know, and especially when it comes to making progress with your physique aesthetically and performance-wise, if you haven't got a grip on your diabetes in terms of your ability to manage your blood sugars, you're going to be at a disadvantage, and you're never going to achieve that end result that you want. So it's a matter of having, one, that you're measuring, accountability, and knowledge of what's actually going on internally. So if you can encompass all that, and then, you know, have a sort of a reference to look at and compare to, and, you know, make decisions with better and frameworks, you're going to do a lot better. So, you know, that's the main sort of purpose with that. And, you know, with that, I'll also be co-launching it with an online community aimed at the same demographic, which is going to be training plans and just a lot of really good talk about training and stuff like that. It's just I want to create a community of diabetics that are really, really into strength training and really, really into maximizing the performance and the appearance of their bodies. So, you know, it's not going to be suited for everyone, but I know certainly that all the people that have asked me to write it and that are still emailing me day in, day out, and the book is coming. So I've just been incredibly fussy with the content because it's, as you know, when writing your own book, it's attention to detail and how much detail to put in and how much not to put in. And
yeah, if I can offer you just one piece of advice on that, don't wait for perfection, or else you're going to be waiting forever. So
definitely,
put in what you know and put in your knowledge, but don't wait for perfect, because that doesn't exist. But I want to kind of interject, because you've given so much really great information, but I want to kind of back it up for the people who are watching, who you and I have similar backgrounds in that we got into physical fitness later on after diabetes, and that's what happened with me as well. And I've shared my story many times, but I want to hear, because you said you kind of spent some time on the recumbent bike and were kind of, you know, hesitant to go down to the weightlifting. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about what the transition was? Did you hire somebody as a trainer to train you the first time you went down to lift weights? What was the actual thing that happened that got you off the recumbent bike and into the weightlifting?
Yeah, well, I mean, the sole reason I went to the recumbent bike was because I was, you know, very insecure in my physique, and my body in the gym was full of ripped bodybuilders that were twice my age. So it was daunting to venture down to the end of the gym where I wouldn't be lifting anywhere near what these guys were lifting. And it was sort of probably my own, mindset that was giving into that. But I never hired a coach. Everything that I did myself was self-learned from the start. And to be honest, that is something that I look at now upon reflection and know that I could have saved a lot more time and effort, but the coach was next to impossible to find. So, back then the internet wasn't a big thing.
Right.
So now it's much more easier to access information, access people. I mean, back then there was no Facebook, there was no Bebo, I think it was MySpace, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't use that, obviously. I don't even think I had a mobile phone. But, things have evolved since. And that transition with the weight training, I mean, from doing the research and stuff, I mean, weight training, context specific, is, if you can do it, is the best form of exercise for anyone with diabetes, provided they're not injured in any way or they're biomechanically fit to do it. Just with the whole process of how the muscle tissue influences insulin sensitivity and stuff like that. So we can go into that in detail if you want. But yeah, I mean, it was the number one form, and plus the fact that it made me look a little bit better. So yeah, that was it. And,
nice. All right, cool. So I want to hear a little bit more about your podcast. So obviously you got into health and fitness. You hid your diabetes for a while, which I also find interesting, and also a common theme now that I've interviewed so many people, is that whether we're kind of out there and sharing our diabetes story openly, or we're not necessarily sharing our diabetes story, but we're still out there doing our thing, hiding our diabetes has been something that I've found to be a common theme throughout. And also coming to a point like you have, where you're saying, I think I need to re-examine this hiding my diabetes thing, because by doing this hiding it, I'm maybe even doing a little bit of a disservice to the other people in my community who could learn from what I'm doing. So
yeah, I mean, I hid it, one, probably out of just a male perspective, out of just getting on with something and, just not complaining or bitching about it. And, now when it comes to, I mean, I understand that I've spent my life reading and trying to understand what's going on within me. And for anyone that, doesn't understand that and doesn't fully have control of their diabetes, for me to know what is actually going on internally to that person if they don't look after, scares me, to be honest. So, when I see a young guy come up to me and who has no knowledge of what's actually going on with him, it's scary to see that. With what goes on inside the body if it's not looked after. And, it really is a ticking time bomb if it's not looked after. And that's every second and every minute that you're not in control is, well, you're dying, really, quicker. So that's the way I see it. And I think that there should always be a 24/7 level of paranoia around that, but just to do your best to control that. And obviously, there's going to be bumps and rides at the time, but if you can understand why they happened, you can deal with them better the next time. And that's repetitive training that has to take place over years and years,
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I had, with 25 years with diabetes, I've, gone from obese to now athlete. And I think that the transition that you're talking about that actually took place for me and that takes place for a lot of people is that exactly what you're saying, about diabetes management practices, about doing the best that we can do with what we have available to us and actually being able to pay attention to it, listen to it, figure out why, why is my blood sugar high right now? Why is it low right now? Most of the time there is a reason that we can trace it back to. However, the issue is that before I got into physical fitness and enjoying my health and making my health a top priority in my life and feeling good about that, which is not how it always was, I saw all of those things as a chore, as an extra thing that I had to do in my day, all day, every day, that just felt like a burden. And now I feel like it's a gift that I get to know this stuff about my body. I'm so happy that I know about how my body works, just like I know what's going on in it. But it is a mental shift between I have to do this and I get to do this. And I think that you, maybe with your diagnosis, you were a little bit older. I guess if you're 28 now and you're 13, you were 15, they kind of said to you, hey, this is up to you. And they told you that at diagnosis. Whereas for me, that wasn't told to me. It was pretty much just the pictures of the amputations, and this is pretty much.
Yeah, America. We obviously don't have to pay for our medication and stuff. It's a different healthcare system, and I mean, you guys have access to a lot more things than us. I mean, for a start, I mean, I don't use a pump. I don't use any of these fancy Dexcom meters that you guys have. I don't think I've seen one in the country. And like I said to you off air, I'm not prepared to change that because I've got used to working with that. And obviously, I'm writing the book, taking into account individuals that do use pumps and stuff. But calculating the insulin and the basal and the bolus and stuff like that is outside of my scope, and I'm not familiar with that. So it's something that is interesting, but it's something that I don't think I will ever venture into, to be honest.
I said that too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the idea of, with training and stuff like that, and wearing a weightlifting belt, and it's potential to get ripped off on me, a lot more than the average person, and I don't like the fact of contracting muscle fiber with something in my arm, and there's a whole go of things that'll go through my head, that. But I mean, I'm fairly happy with my level of control. Don't get me wrong; I get the odd spell. But I mean, they're very, very, very quickly rectified. I mean, I would never go a few hours with a hyperglycemia or anything like that. So the only problem is if it catches me in the middle of the night or something like that, and I'm sleeping through it. But throughout the day, as I say, nowadays, I don't test as much because I can sort of feel where I'm at. Mm-hmm. But then again, sometimes you'll confuse things like caffeine. A stimulant can make you feel a certain way, fatigue, stress, all these things, and various different scenarios. Again, like I said, diabetes is 1,001 different variables to take into account.
That's what happened with me with the Dexcom. I mean, out of the 25 years I've had diabetes, 21 of those years I was manual daily injections. I had no interest in changing to a pump. I had nothing. I had no interest in it. But what I did have interest in was, like you said, the continuous glucose monitoring, because of exactly what you just said, the sleeping through highs and things like that. And I knew that sometimes at night, or particularly because I do CrossFit, the spikes and the drops can happen really quick within a 5-minute period. So to have this screen next to me that I could continually monitor my blood sugar and see arrows that were telling me which way they were going, it was more of, hey, I want to have even better control of what is going on in my body. And the way we learn more about things is to have more information about them. So that's what got me into the Dexcom. But once I had the Dexcom on, I said, oh, well, now that I have this thing hanging off my body, maybe I'll try this pump. And I've only had one pump, and only for the last about 4 years or so. And that's the Omnipod, and that's because there's no tubing. But I was like you, where I said, I'm on manual injections and this works for me. And it was working for me. And that's why it's great to have options. So if you have manual injections and that's what's working for you, I know tons of people who are thriving, have great A1Cs that are on manual injections. It's just, it's funny because I was once like you and I said, I'll never have a pump.
Yeah. I think over here we have a little, criteria and stuff, certain individuals will be more accepted for that kind of therapy or whatever. You have to have a X amount of certain, lapses in control to be applicable for it.
Sure.
Same goes with the continuous. It's the Freestyle Libra we have over here. Mm-hmm. But that interests me. Definitely the continuous glucose monitoring, and it is something that I probably will chase up. But I mean, my diet and my activity levels pretty much stay the same. Mm-hmm. Day to day, so it's quite predictable for me.
Yeah, and that's the best thing about routine is predictability. So, and it's great for people with diabetes as well. Yeah. I want you to just give a little bit more information about your book, though, because I would imagine that after hearing all of your passion about diabetes and weightlifting, people are going to want to read your book. So we said it's called The Diabetic Muscle and Fitness Guide. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you know when we can expect to see that available?
I am hoping to get that ready around about September time, and it will be available on ebook and it will also be available on paperback/hardback. And that should be available through my website, diabeticmuscleandfitness.com. Also as well through Amazon and stuff like that. The US version of the paperback/hardback book will be around about the end of September or so, but I'm currently getting it proofread, bits and pieces, so I have to respect the individuals' time that are going through it. So yeah, it's a matter of where to draw the line on the content at the moment. You know, it's not going into extreme depth that it's clinical and hard to understand. It's written more as a storytelling / sort of practical physiological guide as to what actually happens with diabetes. And we'll go in and talk about some real interesting stuff. I mean, everything from protein intake and diabetes right through to the likes of use of creatine and carnosine and beta-alanine supplementation. We go quite in depth. It's more for the specialists that's really into strength training and bodybuilding. So, you know, but again, it's certainly it's open to everyone. And I do talk a little bit about type 2 diabetes in it as well. You know, generally speaking, the main treatment for that is physical activity and exercise. So, you know, there's various different aspects to it that I've talked on, and I've gone into my own personal story. There's a little bit of humor in it and stuff as well. So I outline a few experiences that I've had. But yeah, I'm very excited to get it out. But as you say, it's a constant chasing of perfection that is holding me back. So yeah, all is going to be good. We'll talk a little bit about the demographics of diabetes as well. Again, the prevalence of it worldwide. We'll talk about factors such as psychological things as to why most diets fail, right through to some factors that influence the current obesity epidemic as well. And I mean, not every type 1 is obese, but it is technically a state of undernutrition. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people with type 1 diabetes are at a severe disadvantage when it comes to muscle growth. And if I can educate on the reasons why, then I hopefully can improve the quality of people's gym outcomes and fat loss efforts and muscle building and stuff like that. The big thing with a lot of diabetes sufferers that I come across is the fact that they struggle to maintain muscle mass. They struggle to get lean and stuff as well. So, and you know, when I talk about lean, I'm talking 6-pack level, very, very lean. And trying to maintain a high level of performance there is important, because we can take into account nerves of competition day right through to a whole host of things that can affect performance, you know, and you know, that's basically it. So the online community as well will be a very interesting section too, where we're going to publish research on all aspects of training and nutrition, review that, talk about it from a diabetic perspective, look at the implications, look at the pros, look at the cons, make suggestions, and then after a period of time, hopefully get a community built with that. A large following will be from the UK. Obviously, at the moment, we have very little resources in terms of that. So yeah, I'm excited to get it out there, and I know it's going to help a lot of people. And as I say, it's not in any way coming across as a clinician's guide. It's purely from a diabetic who has eaten, slept, and breathed the whole thing for the past 13 years or so, and has everything there to prove it. So, as I say, hopefully my journey can inspire someone else to do something about their condition, and that's the most important thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very excited. I mean, as an athlete, I can't wait to read the book, and I will definitely help you, you know, get the word out. And for anybody, like, I always put all your links underneath this video. So anybody who's worried about, you know, getting to Phil's website, all the links are going to be underneath the video on YouTube and on my blog. So whatever you send me over, we'll put links up and things like that. So
thank you very much.
Before we kind of keep moving, are there any other projects other than your book that you want to kind of tell the public that you're working on, or is that kind of your big focus right now?
Yeah, my big focus is the book right now. I mean, every other day I coach a lot of general members of the public. I speak usually every 2 to 3 weeks, somewhere in Europe or somewhere in England. My main clientele are personal trainers and fitness experts. So I go to speak to groups of individuals about everything from nutrition, training, right through to building a personal training business. So that's my main element now. The podcast is very, very good. I mean, it's general fitness and nutrition. It's not diabetic specific, but if you are a personal trainer listening, it's well worth tuning into. We've had some top guys in there, plenty of people from the States. I think the last guy from the States was Nick Tomanino, who many of you will know. He's a well-versed trainer in the States, writes for pretty much every main publication, bodybuilding.com, T-Nation, all the whole lot. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, so yeah.
Cool. So as we always do, as we wrap things up here, I would love to know, and I'm sure everybody else would love to know, what your top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes are. What have you decided for Phil that your top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes are over the past 13 years?
Okay, so if I could look back, first of all would be to measure. What gets measured gets accomplished. That's probably the most important thing. Over time, you can get a little bit more lax with it as you begin to familiarize yourself with your condition, with your treatment protocols. If you're eating the same diet like we talked about earlier on and you're eyeballing food portions and you know how that's going to affect blood glucose, again, it's a result of measuring. 2 would be to be incredibly mindful of stress. That's environment, that's your own perception of particular circumstances. Stress is a massive factor in the control, stress management, in the control of my diabetes. I have a very busy life, so I'm always running after people or they're running after me. I'm always got project deadlines and things like that. And sometimes life can get very flustered and overwhelming. And then when you add diabetes to the mix, and then you add the fact that you're wanting to chase a bodybuilding goal or you're competing or something like that, you can stress out and be in a constant state of fight or flight. And that can have implications for your control. So learning to take a time in the day to work on yourself before you work on anyone else or before you begin to start your job is incredibly important. 1, just to sit and calm your mind. And 2, I journal and stuff a lot as well. So I'm very reflective of my thought process. I'm very reflective of how I interpret certain situations, because I know if I react on impulse that it will not be too beneficial to my health. And I've found that if I can calm my stress response a lot in a lot of circumstances where most people would normally go mad, it doesn't really have implications for my blood glucose. So many of you guys listening will know how a severe bout of stress can ruin your control and everything goes out the window. Insulin just doesn't do its job. And yeah, it's incredibly important to learn how to react to that, if react at all. So thirdly, where could I start? Educate yourself, learn the understandings of the physiology of the body, learn why your blood glucose levels will go up at certain times and go down at others. Learn about your medications and the peak times and everything else in between. Learn about stress, learn about sleep, learn about hormones, learn about as much as you can. And if you need to go and see an educator about that, you need to go and buy a textbook and have somebody talk you through it, what happens in the liver, what happens in the pancreas. Educate yourself on the complications, all that kind of stuff is really, really important. Because if you can understand that, then you can react better and you know what's going on and you don't have to get frustrated and ask yourself why all the time. So that would probably be awesome. 3 big tips there. So.
Yeah, no, measuring. I'm always about, you can't manage what you don't measure. So I'm right there with you on that. And managing stress. People know that listen to me, I'm a huge proponent of meditation, yoga, things like that, gratitude, journaling, all of that stuff. So I'm right there with you. And obviously,
it's sort of looked at in a corny way, for somebody who doesn't do it. But once you start doing it, you'll find that you'll crave it. And it really does make a difference, and I can testify to that. And meditation takes a while to get into. But again, it's one of those things that if you can't take 30 minutes for yourself, your routine's messed up. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So awesome. So I'm really excited. I think that I've learned a lot from you. And honestly, I feel like I probably just off air sit here and keep talking to you for a long time because you feel like you're full of knowledge. But thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us today. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap things up, or are we done on the Irish side?
I think we've covered quite a bit. And I mean, you know, for all those people that are listening, I mean, guys, never take yourself too serious, you know, and always try and find the humor in yourself, and try and find the humor in your diabetes as well. And always just laugh it off and do your best to react and get back on track always. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining
very
us,
much.
Phil Graham from Northern Ireland. Very excited to have you. And thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, click the thumbs up, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Take care, guys.